I'm testing this microphone. See if it works. Let's see. Um, have you seen the new? Let's see. I'll share it. Just gonna make this quick, really good. So I was hoping Warren would make a video like this because now
How to
I think this video is interesting because he takes the words of Calvin, actual Calvinists, and then he kind of does this implicative kind of I don't know, rhetoric or whatever, but he's totally is what I think I'd like to see Calvinists do is explain what's wrong with it. Like, what do you disagree with, if you do, or explain why or what's incorrect. I'd be interested to see a Calvinist do that. That would be great. Or like talk about just watch this video, say what's wrong and what's right about it. So like, let's see. I'll play part of it, but I'm not gonna. It's his video. I don't want to. But I mean, I'm very small channel and he's big, so it doesn't really matter probably.
pray like an honest Calvinist. You can follow along with me. You will know it is time to pray along when you hear the divine gnosis sound like this.
Well, I don't know about.
Let's begin now.
God from all eternity did, by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass.
Oh, there's a part I
Would
wanted
you
to
like to know how I became the longest survivor of mesothelioma? Over 20.
Oh, I skipped it to a different video. Shoot.
How to pray like an
The part I was most curious
By the
about.
most wise.
This, when you go to give someone the gospel, because it's
responsible for all the evils of the world as you designed evil into your creation.
So I can find the right spot.
How foolish and frail is the support of divine justice afforded.
Okay, this part right here.
It's even what is really evil for his children's good.
When a child is God responsible, and did he decree that?
Yes, because if not, then it's meaningless and purposeless.
Oh God.
Okay, now the question is, should you make this prayer? Hopefully you can hear me, or it's not too loud or weird. How should we, like, what is wrong with this, essentially? James White has said, I think he's biting the bullet, right? If God didn't decree child, you know what? It has some greater purpose. And if that's true, how are we supposed to respond to that? And so I think these are questions people should wrestle with, in other words, because how should we honestly approach this if that's true? That God must have ordained, the molestation of minors by psychopaths. To be honest, like, just to be blunt, it's like, you shouldn't say that. Something's wrong if you're saying that. It's not funny. This is, like I say, like, how you can, just with a straight face, say that it's hard enough to say God permits it, but to insist that it's not a mere permission or allowance, like Calvin says, which he quoted in this video, which I didn't show because I'm not going to play the whole video, because go to his channel to watch it if you want to. But I think this, if somebody can manage to not just be offended by this, I don't know. So yeah, listen to this. Why wouldn't you make this prayer like this? Or why shouldn't you if you are the perfect Christian or something?
who unchangeably and eternally ordained the Holocaust, I praise you for war, for violence, for torture and death. I praise you for injustice and all the widows and orphans you've made. I praise you for the tremendous suffering you've inflicted upon mankind. I give thanks for every thrust of the child abuser, for you determined the perfect number of such thrusts for your glory and good pleasure, and the good of your chosen people, even those you inflict such tortures upon. I praise you, O King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and heavenly abuser of abusers.
I like to explain it this way. If there's one molecule in the universe running loose outside of the control of God's sovereignty, what I like to call the one maverick molecule, then the practical implications for us as Christians is that we have no guarantee whatsoever that any future promise that God has made to his people will come to pass.
So if you're interested, you can go to Idol Killer's channel and see that interesting video. Very interesting. But I guess I'll just briefly say a few things. Oh, people are actually coming to the channel. It's interesting. Let's see who's here. Hi. Hey, Eric. Hey, Ryan. So the question I would have would be, if you were perfectly like, I suspect, Ryan, you would probably not say, obviously, like, I don't know. I'd be curious what you would say. Um, I know people don't like that approach or whatever, but I think the questions are worth asking because, yeah, that's when I really start to just be like, look, I can't go that. I'm not. I mean, like, I don't want to. Sorry, I don't want to demean anybody because I do have respect for the reformers who are Calvinistic, but I think it was like, to me, it seems like when you take the logic of the system and it meets like a difficult thing and you insist that God, um, or, determined that everything, including, and it just has some mysterious purpose, like children being raped. It's like, I don't think so. I don't think that had to happen. And I don't think God's promises or control were at risk if it's true that we say God allows rapists to make the decision to do horrible things, um, and there's consequences for them. I don't think God loses control to keep his promises if we utterly separate God from the people doing grievous acts. And it's weird because on one hand, it seems like even among Calvinists this isn't clear because I think some Calvinists rightly wouldn't go there. They'll resist that sort of meticulous control. And I've heard some kind of say God's just not, he lets them go, sort of thing, in their depravity or something, more that way. Because something that's always been in the back of my mind, I'll just briefly say, because this is a test for my microphone. I didn't plan that. I wasn't planning on doing anything particular, but like there seems to be some sort of issue where it feels like, from my perspective, it feels like there's like this confusion because God created everything and everything is contingent on God. And maybe because he knows what's going to happen ahead of time, although we really don't know in what way, and that God knows the future, and like he does, he sees it. You could say he sees it, um, to differentiate it from like saying a direct causal thing. Because, but like God creating everything and being the only non-contingent thing doesn't require us to say God. Uh, I think I brought it up to my dad, who is not a theologian, and the first thing he said was, when I was saying about showing him some quote, I think from James White, about the child rape thing, and I was like, well, yeah, okay, God ordained. So his first thought was ordained doesn't mean cause, other than, so this is the issue with like ordained, determined, cause, and God's foreknowledge. It's like foreknowledge is not predestination. So forget the means of how God knows the future for a second. Like, don't assume I'm saying any particular way necessarily, but just the idea that, say, God knows every minute detail that people will do. Like, I think the issue is, to what degree is that causal? Because no matter what, you have to say everything's contingent on God, meaning like it exists because of him, right? So he's responsible in that sense. Does that make him responsible for the murder? And I feel like Calvinists are leaning more towards a causal sort of thing, and non-Calvinists want to make a bigger separation. But it's not easy. There's not a good language to how to separate. Like, what's the difference between ordain and cause? And I'm sorry, I'm not going to say, like, the Bible says there are things from the world that are not from the Father. And I feel like a really consistent or harder Calvinist is going to say, well, yeah, but that ultimately just really means it's from God because the world is from God. But does the Bible want us to think that way? I don't think it does. Other than that, yes, the world has existence because God made it. Everything's contingent. It has existence because God allows it, permits it. But that's why people believe in free will. In other words, God says, I didn't ordain it. I didn't command it. It didn't even come into my mind. I think the ESV says it literally uses the word decree. So some ambiguity. I'm not sure what the Hebrew words are that end up getting translated that decree or not, and why some translations will use the word decree there. But I don't think it has as tight of a meaning as people think, I suspect, and that's why there's different terms often employed. What does it mean that God decreed it? Is there any indication to tell the difference between, like, how, these eternal decrees and such? I think is the construction, which may or may not be true from a neutral point of view. Most people think God, this is like, I think the Calvinists do have a strong point where if you assume complete classical theism, it's a reasonable inference. But then when you consider the biblical distinctions with the separation of God and sin, I don't care what classical theism says at that point. Um, anyway, so this will conclude my test. I'll be doing a live stream, open panel, probably tomorrow. Eric, that was fun tonight. That was a good talk there with Kenny and everybody. And let's see, I wanted to test this out really quick. How's the sound? Can you hear me? So let's see, I think I had a slide. Actually, you know what? I'll do that later because I need to connect that. It's the second part to my video, but regarding Daniel 9 and 8. Let's see. Yeah, okay. See you guys. Good night.